Can you talk a bit about what the news media landscape in the Gulf looks like and how this news environment shapes disinformation and influence campaigns?
The media environment in the Gulf states is very important. The media environment anywhere is the basis for how disinformation spreads. And so that context is essential to understand how disinformation works. In the Gulf, there are several large media organizations that are at least affiliated with or partisan towards certain states, even if their content isn't exactly directed by those states. The most famous of these is Al Jazeera. Around 20 years ago, Al Jazeera burst onto the Arab political scene, turning what was often a dry and dusty conversation with very strict red lines into something that Americans would recognize as political debate in the US. Now, Al Jazeera isn't the only one. The other Gulf states, especially Saudi Arabia, have large and influential media corporations that have influence across the region. Because of the economic power of the Gulf in the Middle East more widely and across the world, Gulf media has the power to shape views in a large number of countries. But there's another thing that I want to emphasize as well, and this is that the media environment for disinformation can be very strict, whereas in the US, freedom of speech is virtually sacrosanct. This is not the case in the Gulf, and it's especially not the case online. The Gulf states have a legislative framework that really pushes people to be careful about what they put online. This includes relatively recent or updated cybercrime laws. Right? And cybercrimes are not just, in this case, hacking into networks, stealing people's credit card data, but they're also content crimes, where things that you put on social media that maybe don't meet the laws of the land, that offend particular religious points of view or people in power, can put you in prison.
What do you think disinformation in the Gulf can tell us about the future of technology and conflict in the Middle East?
So there are three real lessons for technology and conflict in the Middle East from disinformation in the Gulf. Firstly, that disinformation isn't a separate problem to other forms of technological advancement or other types of technological conflict. On one side, disinformation is part of the broader media environment. You have to understand how media in the Gulf works in order to understand and combat the spread of disinformation. On the other hand, it is also closely tied to hacking operations, to intrusions into networks, like that in the Qatar news agency. And I've written a lot on this, saying that we need to think about instances where you get a hack and then a leak in the same operation as happened in the 2016 US elections in the same breath. We have to consider them together. We have to think about disinformation in the broader context of media dissemination and how the information was obtained in the first place, which is often through hacking operations. So disinformation is part of a broader media environment. The second thing we can learn about the future of technology and conflict in the Gulf is that things that happen online very quickly lead to offline consequences, and vice versa, right? So you have offline things affecting online. And this is what I meant by the cyber catalyst of the Gulf crisis. You can't understand the Gulf crisis without thinking about how movements online, how political disagreements online spread offline and eventually led to this diplomatic split that is ongoing. Far more widely, let's think about the Middle East more broadly. You see hacking operations targeting critical infrastructure in states very close to the Gulf. You see espionage conducted through cyber means, again, both in the Gulf and more widely. Now, we can't sort of cut these off and say these are just things happening online. They don't really affect, real world politics. The real world is online. And that's something that we have to remember and think about in the future. And finally, just a thing on disinformation, specifically in the Gulf, and this is something that tells, maybe resonates with the American public at the moment. In the Gulf, one of the things we learn about disinformation is sometimes the cure is worse than the disease. that the measures taken in response to disinformation, whether these are authoritarian, very strict cybercrime laws, or their attempts to do disinformation back, right? So if someone is manipulating your information environment, they're persuading your public or something, what you should do is just manipulate them as well, right? That leads to this escalatory cycle where you get more and more disinformation and less credible public sphere. So we want to be very careful about adopting certain responses, especially in law, to disinformation, because they could make the problem worse rather than making it better.